Let's talk about its consistency changes. Everything. English story. Welcome. The story you are about to hear is a practical guide to overcoming perfectionism. It's an immersive opportunity to improve your vocabulary and listening skills while learning a powerful lesson. The enemy of great work isn't a lack of ideas. It's the graveyard of perfect beginnings. This is the story of a brilliant writer who was a master at starting but who never reached the end. A lesson about the secret weapon that defeats the blank page: consistency. Our story begins in Nia's apartment in Manhattan, a place that was, at the same time, a nursery of creativity and a cemetery of dreams. 5 open notebooks with the first pages of brilliant novels. Computer screens with drafts of stories that promised to be genius. Nia, at 28, had no lack of ideas. She had an excess of beginnings. The cycle was always the same: an explosion of enthusiasm, days and nights immersed in a new world. But then, the first difficulty appeared. The first sentence that didn't sound perfect, and the grand vision in her mind collided with the imperfect reality on paper. Frustration set in, and the project was abandoned, joining the others in her cemetery of almosts. After another week staring at a blank page, the existential crisis hit hard. She looked at her brilliant beginnings and felt like the biggest fraud. Unable to bear the walls of her own failure, she did the only thing she knew how to do when a project went wrong. She fled. She took a train north, to the only person who might understand her silence: her great-uncle Martin, in his quiet house in Cold Spring. Martin Williams, a 75-year-old author with over 20 published books, with eyes that had lived more stories than those he had written, received Nia not with questions, but with hot tea and comfortable silence. After she poured out her brilliant ideas and humiliating failures, he took her to his study. It wasn't a modern space, but a sanctuary of wood and paper. And in the center was his treasure, an old vintage typewriter. "Every day, since I was 30, Martin said, with a smile, I sit here and write 200 words. Some are bad. Most, actually. But they exist." The simplicity of the statement shocked Nia. 200 words, that doesn't change anything. She laughed, skeptical. Martin looked at her affectionately. "There's your challenge," he proposed. "Use it for 90 days. Write your 200 words. But there's a rule. On the typewriter, there's no way to erase. So, no editing, no deleting. Just write. Just let it be born." Nia accepted, more to prove him wrong than out of faith. But the first days were torture. Without the option to delete, every word seemed like a terrible commitment. The sentences she wrote seemed banal, childish. She, the writer of brilliant ideas, was producing garbage. The shame of her own imperfect text was almost unbearable, and the perfectionist inside her screamed for her to stop. However, Nia persisted, more out of stubbornness than hope. Day after day, she fed the typewriter with her 200 imperfect words. The sound of the keys became the soundtrack of her morning humiliation. She didn't show the pages to Martin. She simply stacked them in a box, a growing monument to her mediocrity. On the 30th day, something compelled her to reread what she had written. She expected to feel the same shame, but instead, she felt curiosity. Amid the banal sentences and awkward paragraphs, a pattern began to emerge, a character that reappeared, an idea that connected to another. It wasn't garbage, it was the beginning of something. For the first time, she didn't see flaws, she saw a thread of story. On the 60th day, the struggle had disappeared. The chair in front of the typewriter was no longer a place of torture, but a habit. The sound of the keys was no longer the sound of humiliation, but the sound of work being done. The 200 words were no longer a goal, they were the starting point. And from that thread of story, a tale began to take shape, growing organically. On the 90th and final day, she typed the final words. Then she read the story. It wasn't the masterpiece she dreamed of in her mind, but it was real. It was complete. It was hers, with a feeling of what do I have to lose, and without any expectation, she transcribed it and sent it to an online literary magazine. The act of submitting was already a victory. She had, finally, delivered something. Nia forgot about the story. The act of finishing and submitting had already been enough. She continued her ritual of 200 daily words, the process now more important than any result. 2 weeks later, an email appeared in her inbox with the name of the literary magazine in the sender field. Her heart froze, expecting the polite rejection she already knew so well. But the words she read were different. Dear Nia Williams, we were delighted with your story. We would like to publish it in our fall issue. Nia ran to her great-uncle's study, phone in hand, in a state of happy shock. They accepted it, she exclaimed. But I don't understand. My text was so simple. It wasn't my best idea. Martin looked at her over his glasses, with the calm of someone who already knew the end of the story. No, Nia, it wasn't your most brilliant idea, he agreed. It was your only finished idea. For 90 days, you didn't try to be genius. You just did the work. Perfection was your trap, the excuse to never finish. Consistency was your key. The publication wasn't the end of the lesson. It was the beginning of a new philosophy. Weeks later, back in Manhattan, Nia looked at the creative chaos of her apartment with new eyes. She picked up the magazine with her published story and placed it next to her 5 notebooks of perfect, unfinished beginnings. The difference was glaring. Those notebooks contained potential, but the small published story contained something infinitely more powerful: a period. So, Nia picked up her 5 notebooks of brilliant beginnings, and with a gesture that would have been impossible before, closed 4 of them. She didn't need more ideas. She needed more periods. Her new routine was radical in its simplicity. Keep only one project at a time, with the only daily obligation to write her 200 words. A year later, Nia was no longer the writer of almost. She was the author of her first book, a complete novel, built not with explosions of inspiration, but with the silent, unwavering strength of consistency. 200 words a day. Our story ends where the transformation began, on the porch of Martin's house in Cold Spring. Nia is there, with the first copy of her book in her hands, physical proof of her new self. She thanks her great-uncle, saying he taught her a valuable secret. Martin smiles, looking at the horizon. You always had the secret, my dear, he says. I just gave you a typewriter. He then looks at her book and delivers the final lesson, a secret known by all true artisans. Remember, Nia, the blank page fears routine more than brilliant inspiration. Nia's journey is a reminder that dreams aren't built with great leaps of inspiration, but with the silent discipline of small daily steps. Consistency isn't glamorous, but it's the most powerful force in the universe for transforming a blank page into a finished work. If this lesson about the power of constant routine resonated with you, leave a comment below telling us, what is your blank page that you will start to fill with just 200 words of effort every day? Like and share this video so more people can adopt the secret of constant routine. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that help you learn English. Until next time, persist constantly. respect the routine, and fill your page.